Welcome back, listeners, to That's a Good Card. Today, y'all will have the challenge of getting me to say, that's a good card. While y'all will be doing the convincing, I'll be playing the devil's advocate. Also, stay tuned for some laughs in our closing segment. That's a good card, ? Now's a good time to remind you to hit that subscribe button below if you're listening to us on YouTube. And please, 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 leave a comment below with your suggestion for our next card. All right, y'all, let's get started. What have you brought to us today?
So the last couple times I've been bringing cards that listeners have been kind of asking us to kind of talk about and making suggestions. But today I thought I'd bring a card that I've actually been playing and has done really well for me and won me a couple games. I've been practicing for Fishbowl on my Magda list, and I brought a card called Return the Favor. Return the Favor is, as you could guess, a red card, 2 red pips, an instant, and it has Spree. Choose one or more additional costs. For an additional 1 generic, you can copy target instant spell, sorcery spell, activated ability, triggered ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. And then the other mode is another 1 generic. Change the target of target spell or ability with a single target. So a lot of text here. It is a 2 mana card that lets you basically do kicker. You can add additional things, and what I love about this card is the versatility. It is currently seeing play in, as you could guess, Magda lists. It actually was included in both lists that won 2 tournaments somewhat recently in the last couple months. Nicholas won Path to the Peak 4, and then Maxwell won a Play to Win event over in Pennsylvania, both on the Magda list, and they included this card. You see it also in Godo, Obnix, and then actually a various amount of other meta decks. I saw it in a couple of Sisay lists. I saw it in a couple of Blue Farm lists. None that made it like up there, but you can definitely see people experimenting with this card.
It's definitely an experimentation card. When I checked CEDH analytics for this card, I saw that there was like 100 and something occurrences, which is pretty low overall. It's not the lowest of the card we've done.
No.
But it actually, for a card that was that low on occurrences, there was a wide range of decks that it went in, which surprised me. You know, obviously Magda, like you said, was the one that saw the most by far, but it was kind of interesting to see this played in some 4-color and 5-color piles just to be, I'm guessing, tested out.
Yeah. And the reason I think that people are kind of playing around with this card and trying to see if it fits into what they need is part of the reasons I think that people should include it. So my first point for this card is your dockside is our dockside. So that first ability for 2 red and a generic, you get to copy a triggered ability.
Yeah.
Meaning that if somebody casts a dockside, you're sitting there, especially as a Magda, I'm like, yeah, I'm feeding you. Go ahead. Like, I'm going to pass priority on this thing. And then on the ETB, you get to play this out and then hopefully copy their dockside. And notably for Magda, especially, you get your treasures first. So if you're going to be able to make a good amount of treasures, if this resolves and you get a good amount of treasures, like, you can kind of win on the spot with Magda. And I've actually had that happen. And it was like Magic Christmas Land for sure. And then on top of it, I think a really good spot for this card is in a response to things, right? Because like that other mode, the one where you can change, like basically have a deflecting SWAT, is also rather huge. Other things that I've tried to copy before, Adnaz, other people's tutors. And then I will be honest, I didn't find an answer. So if any listener out there actually knows how this works, let me know. But I was even thinking about how this would interact with a 1-ring activation.
Are you talking about activation as in for the card draw or the ETB
card draw
from everything?
Card draw.
Oh, for the card draw.
For the card draw.
Yeah, I mean, I think you would copy what it copies whatever mode it is based on the number of counters. I think it literally
does it still copy the counters, right?
The amount. Well, it's not that the counters are being copied. It's more of when the ability is activated, it checks how many cards you're going to be drawing, and then you're copying that. Is I believe how it works. But if we're wrong,
please let us know
in the comments. Let us know.
But yeah, that's my first point, right? That this is a good sit back and kind of wait and kind of bait out like
a juicy dockside.
A juicy dockside is kind of like the big thing, right? Like that's the one that you're looking for. But there are other spells or abilities that I think are really ripe for the picking.
Yeah, and I think that the important point you made on this, in terms of like your dock side is our dock side, is the fact that you two get your treasures first. So in a Magda list, that's so valuable where, yes, you're going to get your treasures first and be able to respond with a Magda activation and potentially win on top of somebody's dockside ETB. So that the other person potentially doesn't even get a chance to use the treasures or use their dockside ETB.
Yep.
I think that is the most valuable part of that, specifically for Magda. Cool. What's your second point?
Second point is that this is offense and defense all on one card. You get to copy the counterspell that may already be on the stack that will help protect this.
Whatever the hell you're casting.
Whatever else you're going to be kind of casting, right? I love the versatility of this. You are probably pretty rarely ever going to cost this for all four, like with both modes. So, I mean, there are definitely situations. I've definitely sat there and kind of thought about it. And so that's my second point, is that this is a great offense and defensive card all in one. And I kind of have to go into my third point to kind of continue this point a little bit, is that our Magic Christmas Dreamland scenario is to be able to try to cast both modes, but you have to be patient.
Yeah.
And that might not be a characteristic or behavior that people who love to play mono red or maybe Rakdos want to do necessarily.
Mono red players catching strays?
Hey.
For patience? Miko face?
I am a...
All the Godos
right.
listening are going, oh,
right? You have to teach yourself a lot of patience, and like as a player who likes to just go to face, as a mono red player myself, I've had to learn a lot of patience in terms of like, wait, maybe I just wait, right? Maybe I just go for it now. I can wait for somebody else's like end step to kind of go for it, right? And so the scenario I'm trying to describe is that you're gonna wait for a stack battle. Right? You're going to wait for a stack battle where a bunch of cards are going in and you're mono red and you're like, look, I don't know what I can do.
I'm mono red.
Yeah. But then you can kind of swoop in when things are like, seems like they're petering out. And then hopefully this was fought over like a dockside or an activation of the One Ring or some other activation that you're going to be able to really capitalize on. And you're also going to potentially help stop a win, right, by copying that counterspell that you're like, oh man, I'm out. Like they had the pact, and now I have nothing, right? I have no other answers. It's like, okay, cool. I get to copy. I'm going to copy the pact, and I'm going to point that pact at a pact, or I'm going to deflect the pact to something else.
If you have that patience, if you're able to cast it in two modes, like you said, Magic Christmas Dreamland, there's a huge stack battle. You kind of feign that you have nothing because you're mono red. And get to a point where it looks like all of the interaction has been used and one person is going to come out on top, and then you come off the top rope with this thing and kind of get to decide the outcome for the stack battle. Because there's two separate modes, like two things that you can do that interact with the stack at the same time, it's really overwhelming at that point, because sure, even the person who like won the stack battle could potentially have another piece, right? But it's interesting that you as a mono red player can have something that can have such a huge effect on a stack battle.
And I think that's why we're seeing this card being experimented in on 3, 4, 5 colored decks, right? Because of the slightly higher CMC of this card, it actually isn't too bad of a slot into a more mid-rangey card, right? Like, yes, it is not free to cast, but I think that the perceived value of what you get for 3 to 4 mana is fairly significant, right? Like, if you've already resolved your dockside, you don't have a way to bounce it, but you see a juicy dockside, right? Like, and maybe kind of go off. And I think that's why we're seeing it in these 4 and 5 colored decks.
Just randomly scattered about.
It's not a lot, but it's being experimented.
Yeah, and let's be honest, like, this card is pretty new compared to the rest of the format and a lot of the staples we see. This card's really new. So, I mean, yes, it's been out for a good amount of time, but at the same time, it's not, right?
It's not.
It's very similar to, the pod that we did on Lively Dirge. It's like Spree is still kind of being experimented with. There's definitely some high ceilings that you can get with these cards, And I know that in casual play especially, you'll see a lot of these cards just because you get so much bang for your buck at any given time. But CEDH is kind of slow to pick up on it, and there could be good reasons why, and I might talk about that in my downsides. But I did want to bring up that, well, I guess it's more of I did want to ask you this question, which is, I think that this card seems really good for Magda specifically. I want to ask if you're trying to push this card and make the argument that this card should belong in other decks, or is this more of I play Magda, I know that this is good in Magda, more Magda players should play it? I guess that's my question for you.
I definitely think more Magda players can definitely consider this card, but I think that, as we're sitting here and talking, I don't think at all this is my version of Magda is not a turbo Magda. It is very much kind of more stacksy, right? I can grind with the mid game, and just a lot like Sisse, I can kind of be patient. This is not a turbo card, I don't think, because it's not free, right? I think they want to be more efficient, and so I do think that this is more of a mid-range card, and so I can see a Sisse potentially considering this for some spice, right? To be able to copy a dockside out of nowhere and then kind of go off, right? If the dockside count is 5, like it's worth kind of considering, and so I can potentially see it in Blue Farm, but not really. Like I think, like we talked about last time, I think that the list is pretty tight. But if you're open for like cards to kind of consider, this is a card that I think is worth considering in a mid-range deck.
Okay, good, because I think that, like I said, I really like this card in Magda. I think it's awesome, but I want our podcast to be able to open up that discussion for other decks specifically in the mid-range meta. So I think personally I would want mid-range decks or more mid-range control-y lists to test this out, and I think that that's what we should be pushing for. I will say, anecdotally, before we recorded this, probably about 30 minutes ago, I messaged Atlas, aka Anvil Dust on Moxfield, about this card and said, hey, have you tested this in your Kenrith control list? For those of you who don't know, Atlas just took down Command Fest Tacoma. Shout out Atlas. He's a beast in our local area. Also, check out their podcast, Mana on the Rocks. It's Atlas and Joe who host that. So shout out Mana on the Rocks. I'll put a link in the description below. Where I messaged him to ask whether or not he's considered this card in his list, because this is kind of just like right up his alley and kind of right up the control/copy alley that a lot of Kenrith lists are taking recently. Like ones that will play like stunt double or ones that'll play C double, right? Both of those like kind of instant speed copy type effects. He hasn't responded, but he's probably going to come back and be like, no, it's trash. But anyway, I just wanted to point it out that this card got me thinking about what types of decks would run this. And I think that Kenrith might be one, especially the control list, that could potentially be interested in it. But yeah, let's get into my downsides. You ready for them?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, so my first downside is I hate to grab the low-hanging fruit here.
I do it all the time. Go ahead.
A minimum of 3 cost for interaction. Like, that's the floor. So for those of you who don't know how Spree works either, you have to cast the spell for at least one of the 2 modes, right? So at a minimum, it must be 1 colorless, 2 red pips, and that can obviously move up to 2 colorless, 2 red pips. Also, while we're talking about how Spree works, remember that if you do choose to cast both modes, the actions will resolve from top down. So you'll do the thing on top first, then you'll do the thing on the bottom after that. Anyway, to continue, if the floor of this card is a 3 mana interaction piece, I think that's really expensive for CEDH. I did some digging into the top 4s that have happened in the past 4 tournaments that are currently on EDH top 16s. This is sorted by, I think, 70 plus or 64 plus, rather.
64.
Yeah, 64 plus and higher events. So the top 4s, I looked at all of them, and there was only 3 pieces of quote-unquote interaction that showed up that had 3 mana cost or higher. I did not count Ad Nauseam. That's not interaction, in my opinion. But so the one instance of something that was like true interaction, kind of like how this card is, for 3 mana, was Fire Covenant. There was one list that ran Fire Covenant.
That's 3.
Other than that,
I thought that was
it's
2.
3 mana.
I guess, yeah, you're right.
It's a colorless, a black, and a red.
Yeah.
So Fire Covenant was the only true 3 mana interaction piece in any top 4 lists in the past 4 tournaments. So that's concerning. There was a couple of other pieces that are like semi-interaction, kind of like how Adnos is, but not really, and that's Court of Calling and Intuition. I don't consider either of those pieces to really be interaction. The mono green players will probably be like, hey, Court of Calling is how I get my oof out. I don't know. Shout out mono green players out there, but also don't shout out oof because I'm a Treasure Storm player. So, also I hate oof. / rant. Anyway. But yeah, I just thought it was really interesting that Fire Covenant was the only 3-cost interaction piece that we saw in any top 4 list. It's concerning. It's really concerning. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually, I just had a thought while you were kind of talking there.
While I was ranting about Collector Oof as a Corefold player.
And another way to kind of think about this is like, maybe don't think about it as interaction per se. Think of it as, a copy spell, right? If you kind of tweak the way you kind of copy spell or as your own dockside that you just have to wait for a dockside for, right? You're looking to interact, yes, but like you're looking to interact
it's a value piece.
And it's a value piece, and right? It's almost like a permanent, like that you're casting on somebody else's turn, right? In that sense, like you're think of it like an opposition agent, right? Like at 3 cost, if we expand the interaction to
creatures,
creatures and opposition agent or an endurance. Well, that was free. That one's free. So I don't.
Yeah.
But opposition agent, I think is a solid kind of idea, right? Because for the same mana value,
it's a comparison,
right? It's a comparison. And that one sticks. This one doesn't necessarily stick, but it also hopefully gets you similar value that a opposition agent does. Again, this is something I just thought about, and so I'm sure you can poke holes in that too. Yeah. But
I like that comparison. I mean, I could sit here all day and be like, oh, these are the differences between Return the Favor and Opposition Agent. This is why Opposition Agent is better, but I'm not going to do that. I like that you were able to bring up a comparison to another 3-cost interaction piece that is seen played. I'm not going to look it up now, but I'm assuming a couple of the top 4 lists probably ran it, Opposition Agent. I'd be surprised if they didn't. It's fallen a little bit out of flavor, but I think that if we expanded to top 16, there would be plenty.
Yep.
But yeah, that's my first point. It's hard for me to want to consider an interaction piece that's 3 cost when really none see play in CEDH. So my second point is that this card reminds me a lot of Bolt Bend, which is a card that I've played and tested in Mizzet pretty consistently.
Yeah.
And I just don't think... I'm not a Bolt Bend enjoyer. I don't think that Bolt Bend is that great. Like, even in the best case scenario, which I think Niv is one of the best decks to run Bolt Bend, if not the best, I still find myself wanting more from an interaction piece, and Bolt Bend just like Chief called, Bolt Bend is not it. And Bolt Bend's been out for a while. I think Bolt Bend's been out since 2019. So this kind of effect is very similar, like the change target type thing. The cards could fill a similar role in comparison, and I don't think Bolt Bend is good. So therefore, I'm not sure. Well, let me be clear. Bolt Bend is good, obviously, if you're considering it for the CEDH. So I don't want to get roasted in the comments for all the Bolt Bend enjoyers. But since we're not seeing a huge prevalence of Bolt Bend, I think you can make the argument that we're not going to see a huge prevalence of Return the Favor. I forgot the name of the card.
Oh, wow.
I forgot the name of a card while we're
it's fine. It's been a long day. It's been a long day. I don't necessarily
There's a
disagree.
heat wave where I'm at. My brain's not working. Sorry.
I don't disagree with that. I definitely have also played around with Bolt Bend in the past. I think the big upside of this over a Bolt Bend is that first mode, right? Where you can copy something as well as potentially try to use it to redirect a spell elsewhere.
Yeah, it's definitely more versatile.
Yeah.
It's more versatile, but I think that they fill similar roles.
I agree. I agree.
Like one's a Llanowar elf, one's a bop. You know what I'm talking about?
Right.
I do think that Return the Favor is the better of the two. I will say that explicitly. I think Return the Favor. I would rather run a Return the Favor over a Bolt Bend because of the ceiling. That being said, I just don't think that this specific genre of card is powerful enough.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. My third downside is that this card's in a weird spot where it has to be played in a deck that's red and holds up mana, right? And Magda, obviously, perfect for that. Magda loves holding up treasures. Totally fine. Makes sense, right? The problem comes down to, as you get into like the 2-color, 3-color red decks, 4-color, 5-color, whatever, right? It's really hard to find a deck that wants to hold up mana. You know, I kind of touched on like maybe a Kenrith control, maybe a Niv Mizzet control, like some sort of red control list that's holding up mana, but there's really not that many of them. A lot of the mid-range decks that we're seeing right now will kind of play a good amount of value pieces on their turn and hold up interaction, but they'll held up interaction because, like we talked about, interaction normally costs 1, maybe 2, most of the time free. Most of the time, the mid-range decks are kind of like playing a little value piece and then holding up a 1 or 2 cost spell or a 0 cost spell for interaction, right?
Yeah.
It's a tough ask for a mid-range deck to develop playing a value piece and then hold up 3 mana instead of the normal 1 or 2 and still kind of feel safe, right? Like when you're playing a mid-range list, if you are able to cast something, like let's say you cast Italian, right? And you're like, cool, I have Italian now, but you're able to cast it at 5 mana, you're holding up 1 blue with a Swan Song in your hand, you're feeling pretty good. Like you're not feeling super threatened, you're like, I have a piece of interaction, I can be in this fight, right? Whereas you're not going to really be able to, turn 3 Italian and have enough mana up to play freaking Return the Favor. Right? Yeah. So that's kind of my thought process is like you really have to be in a deck that is draw passing. It has to be red and it has to be a draw pass deck, which are 2 huge qualifiers. You really don't see it very often. That's my third point.
I think this is a really valid point, and it made me think about how I haven't looked at, but I would consider it in some of my like Mardu and Rakdos decks, right? And then Timna Tana came to mind just because it's kind of seeing a little bit more play. I know Dylan from Play to Win is a big kind of stand, so I'm going to have to take a look at his list and see. I don't think he runs it in it that I've seen, but that's a great point.
All right, yeah. What point of mine do you think was the biggest downside to Return the Favor?
I think that for sure the thing that I kept thinking was two thoughts I actually had while I was doing this thing was 1, man, 3 CMC, 3 mana or 4 mana is kind of a lot to hold up, and then 2, I think I was literally kind of going through notes and I had the same thought you did about like what mid-range deck would actually pass and draw and go, right? Like in red, right? Maybe I just thought about it. Maybe Dargo Thrasios, maybe mainly because you're passing anyways because you have a Thrasios and you're trying to do Thrasios activations. Maybe
Thrasios Passios.
Yeah.
I think Dargo Thras is a little quicker though.
Yeah,
but I mean it is mid range, but it's still very much trying to jam consistently.
So yeah, like I said, like I had the same thought. So the 3 CMC for sure is like probably the biggest downside. And I mean it's 2 CMC, but you're gonna cast it for at least 3 mana, right? Like you have to. So that I think is the biggest downside for sure. What about you, Kyle? What point of mine do you think made the most sense?
I think that the offensive defense, like the versatility of this card, is what makes it appealing. I think that when you have a card that has a big Magic Christmas Dreamland and has the ability to protect yourself as well as propel yourself forward, I like that. I like any card that's going to allow you to do that. I do think for the cost, it better be doing something good. And it's also one of those cards where it's like, because this card is not linear in its playstyle, you have like, this is the type of card where in the comments section, if you're listening, people, if you've played this card and you've had a weird interaction where this card just chef's kiss, everything good happened at the same time, using multiple modes, whatever.
Yeah.
That's what I want to hear with this card. I need to hear the dream stories for me to start to piece together the possibilities with this card. Because without that, it's hard to tell. Like, I can think, like, linearly, like, oh, me make counter to counter. But other than that, like, there's probably some... Because this card allows abilities to be copied as well, there's some crazy worlds that we could be living in where you could, steal an ability that's not normally stolen and do some weird shit. So that's kind of what gets me excited about this card, is the complexity of it and the versatility of it. So I think that's your best point.
Well, Kyle, it's come to the time where we ask you what your thoughts are. And I'm going to be honest, I thought I knew, but after your comment, I'm actually not sure at all. So it's time. Have I changed your mind? Do you want to say what I'm hoping you're going to say?
This might shock people, but that's a good card.
Whoa.
I'm
not going to lie. I'm surprised.
So, like, no, like, man, I like that even though this isn't seen often, you scroll through the decks that are testing it. I like that it's a lot of decks that are testing it. And I think it's in a very similar vein as the Flares right now. Which are also 3 costs, but they're free.
Yeah,
they're free. They're free 3, which is way better normally.
Definitely.
But I was thinking about it. I'm like, well, if I'm considering a Flare, like if I'm considering Flare duplication, could I just consider Return the Favor instead and just hope that like the versatility of it could propel it forward? Maybe. So I think that I'm pretty sold on this card in a sense that I would try this if I could. Now, the list I currently run, probably not going to be.
No.
I'm not putting this in Corvold. Niv, maybe. I could do, I could cook something up with Niv. That could be fun. But other than that, I don't think that I'm currently running any lists that would run this. I think it's way too expensive for Rog size, so that ain't happening. But yeah, I think that's a good card.
Oh my gosh. You guys heard it here. Please mark this day. This might be the first time in a while that Kyle has told me one of my cards.
I was thinking about that. I was thinking about that too. I was like, you know what? Y'all hasn't brought a card that I've been really like excited about in a while.
The audience can't see, but I have the biggest smile on my face.
I know. So listeners, I think this is a good time for you to stop whatever you're doing right now and look at the screen, because I'm going to put a card image on the screen that I made a while back that I've sent to Ya.
I'm so excited.
And what it is, for those of you who can't, like let's say you're doing something you absolutely can't look at the screen right now. I photoshopped a card on Stern Scolding, or I photoshopped Stern Scolding. And I added my face as Gandalf, and I added Ya's face on Pippin.
So good.
And I'm pointing to the background where Barbed Servitor is, which is, for those of you, if you haven't listened to that podcast, go listen to that one. That was a good one.
That was a hot take.
And the text reads, counter target casual EDH card recommended by Ya. And then I also adjusted the flavor text. Fool of a Took, this is a CEDH journey.
So
not
good.
a Hobbit walking party. Throw yourself in next time, and then you will be no further nuisance. Now be quiet. So I had some fun photoshopping that, and I will continue to send that to Ya anytime that there happens to be a recommendation for a card that might not make the cut. But you know what? Yeah, you did a great job today. I'm clapping because this card, it's some gas. It's got some spice to it. I like it.
I would love it if people tried it out and let me know what they think. It's been a real fun card to play with. I personally really enjoyed it. I'm trying to slot it into more decks.
All right, y'all. It is time for That's a Good Card? ? Where Ya will be presenting me with the name of an obscure Magic card that hopefully I've never heard of before, and I will be trying my best, along with you, the listener, to guess everything about this card. We're going to guess CMC, mana value, everything that possibly could be written on this card, even flavor text, and the art, everything. All right, Ya, I'm ready for our card for the week.
Are you ready?
What do you got for me?
All right.
Mm-hmm.
The card I brought to you today is Puppet's Verdict.
Puppet's Verdict.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God. I hate this already. I've obviously never heard of this card. It's a black card for sure. Puppets are creepy. in general.
Mhm.
I feel like that I'm thinking like of a puppeteer of some kind with like a marionette type thing. I don't know. Okay, now I'm already questioning it. Okay, I'm gonna go black card. 5 cost. It's 3 and 2 black. And it is a sorcery. And the sorcery reads, gain control of target creature.
Ooh.
It gets -2/-2. That's it.
And
And I'm gonna say the flavor text. Yeah, the flavor text will be full-time puppeteering's a hard gig.
Okay. All right, folks.
Times are tough out here for the puppeteers. I don't know.
That's right. All right. So Kyle said it was a black card sorcery for how much again?
5, 3, and 2 black.
5, 3, and 2 black. It would let you gain control of a creature and give it -2/-2. Okay. Puppet's verdict is a red instant.
Damn it.
For 1 generic and 2 red pips. It says, flip a coin. If you win the flip, destroy all creatures with power 2 or less. If you lose the flip, destroy all creatures with power 3 or greater. Flavor text.
Yo, that's kind of cool.
What was heads again? Question mark. Mercadian Magistrate. Oh, we totally forgot. We skipped the whole part where you described the art. So now that I've given you the card, what do you think the card looks like?
We messed up. Yeah.
No. Actually, you did describe it a little bit. At first, when you said it was black, you pictured like a puppet with like marionettes and all.
Yeah. So we'll go with that with the art, and then we'll just go. I'll put my head on it.
Oh, well, you're gonna love this. And so I'm not gonna lie to you. Picture 2 aliens from Star Wars, right? Standing on each side of a person who looks like he is a judge in the English court, right, with a wig, powdered wig and everything, right? And they're standing to either side of him at his chair, and he's flipping a coin.
Wow.
That's it.
All right, folks.
Did you do as well as Kyle did with Puppet's verdict? Let us know down below in the comments.
Probably. I failed miserably. Anyway, thank you all for listening to today's episodes on Return the Favor. Please direct your attention to our description, where you can find links to our link tree, which will send you to all the places that we host our podcast, whether it's Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else that you're listening. Also, please give us a comment down below with your recommendation for the next card, as well as any super awesome stories you have when using Return the Favor. All right, thank you all for listening today.
We appreciate you. Bye.
Bye.